At this point, I am sure that I am the only one that actually cares about this subject. Okay, so this video has been long in coming, and the reason why is back in December, I used my free month subscription to Audible in order to get the Currents book and listen to it, which I did, and then I promptly forgot every single thing that happened in it. When I tried to look it up to see if there was a synopsis or a summary somewhere on the internet that might jog my memory and bring all the events flooding back to me, I found absolutely nothing. There is nothing about this book anywhere. There is no reviews, there are no synopses, there are no summaries, there's just me and my opinions. And so then I had to use a different service, this one was Scribd, in order to get another month-long subscription for free so that I could once again try and read this book. After listening to it a second time, I wrote down everything that happened in it as it happened so I wouldn't forget it again, and now I can make my video. As such, though, I am now convinced that I am the only person who cares about this book in any way, shape, or form. So if you're watching, thank you. With this last book, things get a lot different, things get a lot more mature, but like not really at the same time. I'll walk you through the events and then you can decide for yourself. And since I've taken the liberty of writing all the events of this book down in my hefty little notebook, hopefully I won't forget anything this time.
Okay, so the book immediately starts off with another character introduction, which is fine. I get it, you gotta like reestablish who people are. But the thing with this character introduction is that it's reintroducing characters that we already met in either the first book or the second book. And I still don't know who these people are.
Is that my voice? Is that my voice? Oh well.
There is Bentley, he's the super brained, super smart kid. He has cerebral palsy, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then there's Penelope, who is his girlfriend. That is her only character trait, and she controls the weather. Oh, and those two are now engaged. They're fiancés. And if that sounds weird to you, because the last time we were with these people, they were like 15 years old, fret not. There has been another huge jump in time, and now they're 19 and in college. But still, 19 is very young in my understanding and perception of, like, getting engaged. Like, that feels weird to me still. And there's Patrick. Patrick is our main character's younger brother. He's super fast. There's Freddie. I think he's the one who can get really big. There's Greta. I honestly, I do not have a single memory of Greta in the second book, but I'm pretty sure she was there based on how they talk about her in this book, so. But she can make a bright light happen. Yes. Oh, and then there's Emmeline, and she's the main person's girlfriend, and her personality is that she's very nice, and she's a very good girlfriend. She is a teleporter, but she has, I think, seizures. I don't remember what Greta's thing is, but she's the one with the bright light. Freddie has asthma, but he can get really big. Patrick is the only one of the Abel's gang who does not have a physical or mental disability. Gang's all here, I guess. There's two new characters. They're twins, and they're from France, and their personality is that they are twins from France, and they sometimes speak French. One is a telepath, which is like Henry, who died in the last book, if you forgot about that. And then the other one is something, I don't know. It always bothers me that, like, characters with X power will get killed off just for another character in the next book with that same power to just replace them. It happened with, forget his name, but in the in-between comic, between book 1 and book 2, one of the main characters died, apparently, which was quite a shock, having not read the comic, but reading the second book. And then Emmeline came in with the exact same power, the teleporting powers, to just replace him. So all of the things that he did for the team with his power is just resolved. You never have to see the group try and learn how to be a group, losing not only like a close friend, but also power that they needed to do what they do. So same with this one. In the last book, Henry died. Very sad. And so now we just have this random French girl who is there, who has his exact same power, so that anything that he used and could be used for as a member of the team doesn't need to be ruined alongside the fact that he is now dead. I don't like that about these books. It happens in every single one of them. If you're gonna kill a character, then leave room for the character to be dead. Leave room for people to have to learn how to work and exist and continue on their lives without that character. And if anything, within the confines of like superpowers and like a team and fighting crime, when you lose a member of your team that had a specific power, and then you now as a team have to learn to be a team without that power, that's like a really good comparison for grief. That's a really good comparison for what it's like to have to go through a loss. There's potential there, but it's so wasted, and that's going to be a running theme. So the telepath is like Henry, where she can be a telepath, but she's not as powerful as Henry, so she cannot send the images to, I just totally forgot the main character's name. What is his name? Philip. I wrote it down because I also forgot it when I was reading the book. But anyway, she can't send images to Philip's braids that he can see like Henry did, which in the last 2 books just completely overwrote his entire disability and what it must be like to have to go through that as a person. So this is the only book in the trilogy where our blind character is actually blind. Echo is another new character, I forgot to mention her. She's a mute, and she can learn about people when she touches them. I forgot about her. This book forgets about her up until the very end when her character is needed to solve the entire plot, and that's the only reason why she's in here. It genuinely feels to me that Echo as a character was not in the original cut of the story, and then he got to the end and he couldn't make the ending work, and so then he just introduces new character and just like put her name into different scenes that she was there, but she doesn't need to be and she's not really there. Alright, so they're in college, they're on a camping trip over break, they're gonna go sightseeing, they're talking about the losses. Philip is very messed up in the head, he's got a lot of anxiety, Emmeline talks him down, and then they go sightseeing the next day. While they're sightseeing, he talks more about how now he's in therapy. There's a lot of focus on this book given to therapy, whether it's him being in therapy or him talking about how he's in therapy. And all of this, he's upset, he feels guilty over Henry's death, he feels like it's his fault. But while they're all sightseeing, the author is flexing his knowledge of New York City, just like every author who has ever lived in New York City and then written a book that takes place in New York City. I notice this all the time. If there's an author who lives in New York City and then they write a book, they will tell you in the book how much they know about New York City. While he's going on his monologue about New York City, there's an explosion, the power goes out. So Emmeline transports Philip into like the middle of everything that's going on, but the others aren't there, so then she just kind of leaves him to go find the others. There's a pregnant woman giving birth in the middle of all this. Even though Philip is blind, he does make his way over to the scene, and he uses kind of like echolocation, I guess, to find his way out of the situation and to help people and save the day until the others all show up. In this part, there is this force that is mentioned. It's called the CCF. It's called the Custodial Containment Force, because if you remember, the superheroes in this world are called custodians. This is basically after the last book when like now everybody knows about them and they've been kind of seen as a threat, and there was this weird kind of like they were being abducted and put in prison plot going on there. Now there is this robot police force that is designated to fighting custodian things that are happening. And it's a little odd because it seems like it's trying to do both like the X-Men and the Avengers, I guess, like early Avengers, where in like the X-Men, people don't like the superheroes. They don't want anything to do with them. They're very much belittled and they're kind of like a marginalized group. The Avengers, the people love the heroes in the beginning, they love the superheroes. They want the superheroes help them and save them. It's great. So it's trying to do like both of that, because you have like on one hand where it's like, oh, well, they're allowed to be superheroes and they're allowed to do all this stuff, but at the same time, there are different forces in the government that specifically go after them. Just like the last book when like that lady was just abducting a bunch of children all the time. That was very bad, but they never really addressed that. And now in this one, there's a robot police force that like tracks them down and shoots at them, and the public is just okay with that. But also they had to be robots too, because that way like the good guys could like wipe them all out being like really cool superheroes, and we would have to feel bad about their morals. In the middle of their efforts, like they're fighting off all of these robots with like their different superpowers, Philip just passes out, which is a little weird because he passes out in the middle of the fight, then he wakes up, and I think he's in the hospital if I remember correctly, and then he just grabs Emmeline and transports them immediately back into the fight. And then there's like this code system that he and Emmeline have come up with that can help him use his powers better, because she only exists to help him use his powers better. So she will be like his eyes, and she will see a threat and she will give numbers, and the numbers mean like where the bad guy is in correspondence to where they are. So if she said like a certain amount of numbers, and he knows like aim there and give that much force, which is fine. It's a great system. I love it. But Emmeline is just now serving the new purpose of Henry. Even though she's not like giving him his sight, she is now the thing that he leans on. She has now become the next character that just follows him around and does everything that he needs her to do so he can be the hero. And even though in the last book it seemed like he tried to address this with Henry, the author, and like how he was using Henry, he just does it again. But this time I guess it's okay because she's his girlfriend and loves him. Anyway, Philip's really good at what he does. He destroys all the robots and then they're home safe. Bentley, the super brain one, if you remember, is building a machine to help Philip, I guess, maybe get his sight back. In the last book, if you remember, his father ended up being like the villain who was feeding the lady who abducted everybody the information about everybody so that she could abduct them. So he's building machines, he's doing his machine thing. There's also a lot of talk in this book about dreams. Like I remember in my last video, I kind of ranted a bit about a dream sequence that went on too long, and that because it's annoying. I don't like dream sequences in books unless they directly apply to the plot at hand. They're very boring to read. This one has like that dream sequence from the last book, but like there's 5 of them or 6 of them. There's a lot of them. There's so many of them, and they're so unnecessary, and I hate every single one of them. So it just goes on like this weird dream sequence, and you know, dreams are weird and nonsensical. They're just his dreams about his guilt and his bad feelings. So we're just walked through like these very absurd dreams for pages and pages, and it's awful and it's boring, and I don't know why an editor would have let this pass, but it's where we are. Philip passes out again. I don't even remember why because I didn't write it down. But when he passes out, he has another dream sequence thing. So there was one dream sequence, then he passed out, and now there's another dream sequence. At chapter 6, we finally get to like the university that they're all at. It's this place called Goodspeed University, and it's a university for custodians. And then also sometimes normal people can join too. The whole explosion thing in New York City caused a big blackout, and so they're all discussing like the blackout and what it was about, why it happened. And then Philip is majoring in speech communications. He has a speech class. He meets a friend in the speech class who wants to be a journalist that covers custodial issues. There's so much time of this book that is given to the speech class. He gives an impromptu speech and he messes it up real bad. His new friend is named Nate. Yeah, I think that's really it that happens in this chapter. He's hanging out with his dog, kind of moody because he's traumatized, and then Emmeline comes up to support him. I don't think that these books pass the Bletchel test. When he gives his awful speech, he actually passes out again. So that's the third time that That's the third time that he passes out, and that's all that happens in that chapter, by the way. In the next chapter, he wakes up in the hospital. Everyone is worried. The doctors want to change his medication. They give him suggestions on how to help his panic attacks, like exercise and relaxing and sleeping better and eating healthier. Emmeline comforts him because that's what she's here to do. His dad and him have a talk about his dad dating again. Philip is supportive of it. Another dream sequence, and that is it. That is it for chapter 7. That is all that happens. Chapter 8 is just therapy. It's just about therapy. It's just his therapy session with this lady about his grief and his guilt. He walks home. He has worried Emmeline, so she's there to talk to him and comfort him some more. And then he spends some time with his brother. And that's that chapter. So do you see that, like, this is a superhero book where, like, nothing is happening? Like, nothing's happening, it's just dream sequences and therapy sessions and speech class. So in the next chapter, him and Emmeline go on a date. There is a lot of this chapter for some reason that is just dedicated to, like, criticizing this movie that they go see. They decide to take a train instead of teleporting, because since Emmeline's a teleporter, public transportation is kind of, like, fun for her. She has a seizure on the train and passes out, and then after she passes out, some street youths board the train, and they harass him while he's trying to take care of his passed out girlfriend. And then one of them pulls a knife on him and stabs him, and then he grabs Emmeline and, like, uses his telepathy to fly, which he does now. And so he's flying her away, but he's blind, so he can't see. So he knows he's probably going to hit something soon. So he wakes her up, and then she panics, and then she teleports them back to her bedroom. And then her father walks in, and it's like a joke. Like, it's like, oh, it's funny. They're in the room. They fell on the bed. The father walks in. So the whole team is trying to discuss this blackout because it happened and they think it's important. So they go to Bentley's and he's messing with something in, like, this back room, and then they show up and then he comes out. If I'm trying to paint him as suspicious, it's because I am. So Bentley tells them about the blackout and how it seems that somebody stole all the energy because, like, he saw things from images, and Bentley is the one who brings all this to their attention. If it wasn't for Bentley, they would not know this. They would not think much of the blackout other than it was very unfortunate that it happened and a little weird. It is literally Bentley who tells them that something weird happened with the blackout and is the only reason they continue to investigate this. I need you to know this. Through images that he has, because he's a super brain, so he uses computers and stuff and can get all this information, he finds a picture of this guy who was in the center of the blackout, and he goes, I think this is our guy. Keep in mind, again, Bentley's the one who's giving them all this information. And also keep in mind that we are on chapter 11 right now, and we are just now starting the plot of the book. So Bentley's going to try and use facial recognition software to find this guy. So Bentley is going to actively try and find this guy. There is chapter 12, which is literally a dream sequence therapy session. That's it. Speech class is in the next chapter once more, and they literally explain the syllabus to us. I don't know if you've ever had to sit through syllabus day at a college campus, but it's short and boring for a reason. I don't want it in a book I'm reading. In this, he gives a speech. He does better than the first time. Him and Nate talk a little bit. There's a friendship developing. Nate wants to go into the field with Philip because Philip's kind of a big shot in this world because, like, he did some cool stuff when he was a kid that was in the other books, and Philip agrees that he can come into the field with him sometime. Penelope and Bentley are having relationship problems. So Bentley finds the energy hogging suspect using his facial recognition software. They need to access a satellite in order to, like, track him down, according to Bentley, to get access to, like, the images of where he's going and stuff. But in order to do that, they need to go to space. So there's just, like, this very short part of this one chapter where Emmeline very quickly teleports herself into space where a satellite is going to be, puts this thing on it so Bentley can hack it and teleports herself back. Seems like it would be, like, a big thing, but it's really not. Just, like, half a second, they go to space. And then Nate is the one who tells them that there's been another energy attack in London. They use the satellite camera that they now have access to see what happened. And Bentley, like, tells them all about it and, like, where that he thinks this guy's gonna go next, all this stuff. Nate is there with them while they're having this talk. Bentley uses patterns in the light to see where this person who's stealing the energy keeps going. They decide to go, and even though Philip decides that Nate shouldn't go because he's a liability because he's just a normal person, Nate grabs him as they teleport and ends up teleporting with them. The patterns lead the entire group with Bentley at the lead because he's the one who knows where everything is because he's the one who tracked it. Leads them to a base in Canada, and they run into a man, the man that they got pictures of, and he says his name is Adam, and he tells them to leave, and he's, like, composed of energy. He mentions a master and a machine that's going to fix the world, and it needs a lot of energy. So he's just, he's monologuing. And then very abruptly, he's like, I'm not telling you anything else. And he flicks them back to the hospital in their town. And he knocks some of them unconscious. And Philip then passes out from another panic attack. So in this particularly, okay, so there was this buildup that was going on here, right? So they find these pictures of this guy. He's this really big, tall guy. He's composed of energy. He's sucking the energy out of these cities and he's using it for something. And he talks a little odd too. Like, he refers to himself in third person. So he's like, Adam, I am Adam, Adam once, kind of stuff like that, which is fine. It's fine. It's all fine. So this is my thing. Up until this point, I was actually getting a little excited because I was like, ooh, do you remember in the first book, okay? I don't know if you've seen my other videos, but in the first book, okay, there is a character named Donnie who is part of the Abel's gang. He is the one that this big prophecy that happens in the book foretold about. He is a very, very, very special kid. He has, like, all the powers, or, like, a lot of powers. I forget which one it is, but he has, like, a lot of powers. He can do a lot of different things, but nobody knows this because Donnie has Down syndrome. And at the end of the book, Donnie sacrifices himself to save everybody, but in doing that, he disappears and nobody knew or knows where he went. In the second book, there's, like, one scene when Philip, like, meets his mother and is sad with her because they don't know if he's dead or not. So in the first book, he goes away, but he does not die. In the second book, he's mentioned again. So in the third book, I was like, all right, it's gonna be Donnie. It's gonna be Donnie. It's gonna be amazing. Donnie comes back. So with the relationship that Philip has with Donnie, he can use that to reason with him and fix everything. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so good to see Donnie come back. It's not Donnie. It's just this random guy named Adam, which again, wasted potential. Just wasted potential. But anyway, yes, so Philip passes out from anxiety again. I think that's like the third or fourth time now. So he wakes up again in the hospital, which again is like the fourth or fifth time that that's happened. This book is very repetitive. The doctors want to keep him for an extended stay. His father's against it. The therapist recommends EMDR. They talk about it. Philip yells at Nate for transporting with them and putting himself in danger. Another dream sequence. And then all those who passed out wake up and they're all fine. Okay, so then they think that the next attack is going to happen in LA. So they all go there. It's Bentley who made an algorithm to predict this. Bentley's algorithm led them here because that's where he thought it was going to happen based on the algorithm that he made for them to find this guy. They stake out where they think that this guy's going to show up. Philip and Emmeline find the guy and engage. Adam starts stealing the energy. They slow his progress. The others arrive. They're all fighting. Greta blinds people with her light. And then Luke does something and he manages to take Adam out. Luke is one of the French twins. Adam runs. So then there's another therapy session and the therapist is very convinced he has trauma, which is like obviously he's watched so many of his friends and loved ones die. But she is like, no, you have trauma from before that. Like before you were a hero, you have trauma from when you were just a little kid. And then there's like, he brings up that when he was a kid, one time he got forgotten about, like his parents didn't pick him up from school and he was blind, so he had to walk home by himself and nobody would let him in, so we just sat outside, and he was like, I felt really forgotten that day. And I'm like, wow, that really sucks, but I'm pretty sure, therapist lady, you should be focusing on the multiple members of his family and friend group who have died horrifically in front of them, usually because it's his fault. He did something that led to that. I think that's where the trauma's coming from. I don't think this one day when he got left outside in the rain is where his trauma's coming from. But yes, another therapy session. So the algorithm spits out 4 different city names of where he could possibly be, and they're all trying to figure out which one it's going to be. Bentley tells him it's probably Nashville. There is another speech day and then another dream sequence. This book is like 90% dream sequence, therapy session, speech. And it's so bizarre because, like, how did we get here? The first book was like this, like what's it called? Sky High? Like, it was like Sky High, but then there were these disabled group of kids who wanted to be heroes, and nobody was letting them be heroes because they were disabled, and they were kind of bigoted against them, which was unfair, and they had to beat the system while also doing really stupid stuff that got them into a lot of trouble, and there was this big cartoony bad guy who, like, would monologue to them all the time, and was definitely not the main character's grandfather in any way, and it was, like, it was stupid, but it was fun, you know? Like, at least it was fun. Like, it was very, very bad, and it was not good representation, and I still will never be okay with the fact that how this guy decided to have disabled kids be superheroes is to just fix their disabilities real quick. I did not think that was cool, but, like, at least there was something. At least there was something going on. In this book, we literally just have therapy, speech, dream. Therapy, speech, dream. That's it. And then when the superhero stuff is going on, it's kind of boring. Yeah, so they're sitting around in Nashville, but then it turns out that it was the wrong city because they predicted something based on if Adam had taken the energy from LA, but he didn't get to because they stopped him, so it wasn't going to be Nashville, it's going to be somewhere else. So Adam shows up and he wipes out the energy, the power grid again. They quickly go, but he's gone already. They just help out where they can. Emmeline and Philip go on a double date with Bentley and Penelope. Penelope and Bentley start very awkwardly fighting in the middle of a double date in a very busy restaurant. Bentley's whole thing is that he wants to be working, and Penelope is like, why don't you pay attention to me? And I'm like, oh my gosh, if only you weren't engaged at 19, and then this wouldn't be that big of a deal. But anyway, Bentley storms off, and then Penelope leaves, and it's kind of sad, and he's like low-key jerk now for some reason. He wasn't in the last 2 books, but he is now. Emmeline and Philip talk about repressed memories because of the whole sitting out in the rain thing that his therapist brought to mind. So Philip gives an interview to Nate, even though he was kind of told not to. Emmeline shows up and tells him that Bentley and Penelope broke up. Something about how Bentley said that he found him, that was a direct quote, and then he left and broke up with Penelope, and he's been gone for a few days since then. This apparently makes something click in Philip's brain, and he understands everything now, and he's like, it all makes sense. And I'm like, no, it doesn't, actually. So Philip gets the team together in Bentley's house. With Bentley, they teleport to the bunker in Canada again, which is where they ran into Adam, like, when they met him for the first time. Nate, who I guess was there for some reason, grabs Philip again and gets transported with them. Again, so this happens twice. And I also don't know why he was there to begin with. Like, the whole setup for the scene, it doesn't make sense that he's there. This is like a superhero gathering. Why is Nate there? Especially with, like, what Philip is planning on doing. Why would you bring Nate? What is Nate doing here? Anyway, he's here to die, but that comes in later. In Canada, Philip argues that Adam might not be bad and that he's just following the orders from this master, which I thought was pretty obvious right off the bat, but I'm glad Philip was able to put that together for us. Adam shows up, Philip starts asking him questions, but he's antagonizing Adam intentionally by saying that his master wants them there for the fulfillment of the plan. So Philip is telling Adam that the master wants them there. Why would he know this? Also, why would that be true? And then he turns around and he goes, don't you, Bentley? So then the narration just cuts off right there. Like, it's not even like the end of a chapter, just like, boop. And then he goes, all right, let me just tell you how I came to this. And he drags us back in time earlier to that conversation with Emmeline. So Bentley has been trying to find his father because his father's the one who sold out all of those superheroes to that lady who abducted them all in the last book. Philip decides this, and then they go and get Echo, because remember, Echo, I mentioned her at the beginning. She's the one who can touch things and like feel things from them, and how she's not existed in the story up until this point. Now she is the most important person in the story. Just very suddenly, she's there. I completely forgot about her until this exact moment when I was reading it. Forgot about her again, even as I was saying it. Even after I warned you that she was going to be important, I forgot about her. So they get Echo, and they have her go into Bentley's like office and touch things and his inventions and stuff, because she's able to read their energies, and she like picks up like a snow globe, I think, and then anyway she signs to Emmeline that like he did it. I don't know what kind of energies you would get from a snow globe to be like, oh yes, he did it, but it happens. So then Philip, after that, so now he's confirmed in himself that Bentley is the mastermind. He is the master that has been talked about this whole time. So then he gets all of his friends together and tells them, before Bentley shows up, before they go back to the bunker in Canada. So he tells them all everything, and they believe him, and everything's fine, and now they transport themselves to the bunker, and now he's confronting Bentley as if everybody doesn't know. It's all just there for the dramatic flair. And then we return to the present. Bentley like immediately turns from like childhood best friend to like conniving villain from a cartoon. He like calls Philip clever, and then he throws like this huge like temper tantrum fit about how his big reveal was ruined. Like he was like, oh, it was gonna be a surprise, I was gonna get you, you ruined it, like a 5-year-old. So the bunker was actually a hologram, and the hologram was finding the machine that could find Bentley's father. Philip yells at him to go to therapy. All of the inventions at this point that Bentley has given to the others to help them with their disabilities now all like turn against them and incapacitate all of them except for like Echo, Lacey, she's the French twin girl, and Philip. They're the only ones left standing. And then he's like, now all I need to do is use the machine. Okay, and so like I just gotta pause again. I just gotta pause because why? On both accounts. Let's start with Bentley's. Why? Why would Bentley intentionally lead his gang of friends closer towards finding out his plot where they might be able to stop him? In this whole end scene, it's like introduced like he wanted them to see. He wanted to show them. But this is like a deeply personal thing for him, like finding his father, to kill his father. That's his goal. So like I don't understand why you would put your plans at such risk by telling your friends everything that you're doing and then letting them find out what you're doing. Like they would have never known if he had never brought any of this up, if he had not helped them, if he had intentionally, I don't know, led them astray along the way. They would never be able to get to this point because he's the smart one and he's also the only one with brain cells in the group. So without him, they wouldn't have been able to figure anything out. So there's no reason for him to have dragged them along on this, to have told them that there was this guy coming around doing all this stuff and then using his facial recognition software and telling them about the satellite in space, like all this stuff that he did. He intentionally set up his own demise. And for what? For what? What purpose did this serve? Why did he do it? We're never really given anything except for the 180 he does to turn into the world's most cartoonish villain when he goes on a rampage and a rant about how his plans were ruined and he was going to show them all because Philip always is better than him and he wanted to be better than Philip for once, and it doesn't make any sense and so stupid, and it's also just like not the character at all. Like from book 1 to now, this is not the same character. The character very much abruptly changed into a completely different person the second they teleported to Canada. And now the why on Philip's side. So if Philip really did figure this all out, if he now knew everything, why would he take his friends to Canada to confront Bentley with the machine there, which is all stuff that he's put together a little bit. Like this is the base, Adam is working for Bentley is the bad guy. Why wouldn't he go get help? At the very least, why wouldn't he apprehend Bentley first? Why would he like let him go so he's free to potentially do something? As soon as he figured it out, as soon as he knew for sure, when he gathered his friends all into Bentley's house and he told them and they all believed him, when Bentley showed up, they should not have gone to Canada. They should have tied him up and locked him in a room. His superpower is being super smart. He's not gonna be able to break out. Just lock him up, and then now you have leverage, and now you can figure out the plan, and now you can stop it, and now he can't do anything to continue it. But instead he's like, let me just bring you where you want to go. Let me just bring you to your machine. Oh no, I hope you don't do anything, like turn it on. Okay, so back to what's going on. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. So he's like, now I just have to turn on the machine, woo. And then Philip is like, once you use Adam's energy, no one will be able to protect you anymore, and then I'm gonna kick your butt, essentially is it. And why didn't Bentley think of this beforehand? Like, oh yeah, he's supposedly like super smart. Like, he's like, oh yeah, so I need the energy to use this machine. Once I use this machine, the energy is used up, it's gone. At that point, I will be defenseless from all of my friends who are now pissed at me and are going to come after me. Maybe I shouldn't have brought him here. Maybe I shouldn't have led them here. Maybe I should have done this on my own time, in my own privacy. But Bentley just continues to like do his 180 and turn into a pouting child, just yelling at everyone for ruining his plans. And then at this point, like the CPF robots show up for some reason, and the government is like demanding that Bentley gives them the machine. The machine is like can just find specific superheroes. That's like the whole point of it, I think. So the government paid Bentley to make it, and now they want it, and Bentley's like, no, you have to let me use it first. That was part of our agreement. And they're like, no, we don't care about you. We're just gonna take it. And this is actually where my notes end. So let me see if I can remember how this book ends. Okay, so Bentley runs to go turn on the machine. These robots are everywhere. Philip is trying to fight them with the only other 2 standing members, which is Echo and Lacey. He tells Echo to go touch Bentley because if she touches Bentley, then she'll know how to turn off the machine, which she does. You have to like block this energy current. He's fighting the robots and then he cuts off the current, but he does that by like throwing himself into the current. And oh, the title of the book just made sense. And then he and Adam are both like trapped in that current together, and obviously they're both gonna die, except for maybe not, who knows. So it like explodes on them, essentially. Dream sequence. Philip like wakes up like in like this weird like meadowy peaceful place, and Adam's there and they're talking, and Adam's explaining like his backstory and like why he did what he did, which I forgot to mention earlier, but it is like a thing where Adam was abused by his parents, and he met Bentley when he was like younger, I guess, and Bentley kind of mentored him and took care of him and convinced him to do all this stuff for him. It's awful. It's not great. It would have been so much better if it was Donnie, like 100% so much better if it was Donnie. It would make sense why Bentley was able to manipulate him, and then it would also make sense why he would have a change of heart, which is what he does right now. He has a change of heart. He apologized for what he's done. He says, I just want this last moment of peace, and then he uses his powers to somehow save Philip so that he doesn't die, and then Philip wakes up in the hospital for the 10th time in this book. After that, we go back to the speech class, because that was very, very, very important, and definitely in the same realm as everything else that is going on in these books. So in speech class, he gives his final speech, and it's all about how he's not going to be a hero anymore, and he's like, if you want to keep being a hero, that's your choice, but I'm deciding not to be. I'm done with the hero business. Everybody I love is dying, and it's like supposed to be this moment of like finality and peace, which like, yes, this boy should stop doing hero work because everybody keeps dying. Oh, I forgot to mention, Nate died. And all of that, Nate gets shot and dies. So that's another one of his friends that died because of him. But also, that was definitely Nate's fault. He did that to himself, 100%. But I love how Nate was just like introduced in a character for the sake of him dying at the end. Like that was his only purpose in this whole book, because we have to have one of his friends die every book for some reason. And then after the speech, he goes back to therapy, because unless you forgot, the most important things in this book are dream sequence, speech class, therapy. And so that's how we had to end it. And so he's in his therapy session, and his therapist is like, you've improved so much, I'm so proud of you. And he's like, yeah, I feel great. And she's like, what about you and Emmeline? Are you guys gonna be okay? He's like, yeah, I think we're gonna be okay. That's it. That's it, actually. Yeah, that's the end. That's the end of the book. That's the plot.
Alrighty, so what do we do with all of that? So, in reading this, you can tell that comic books are the inspiration for these books, and that is totally fine. What is less fine is that he continues to try and write a book like it's comic book, and it does not work. It is impossible to keep track of all the characters in action because it's almost as if he expects that we can see it when we cannot. Writing and visual media are very different things. They're very different, and you cannot rely on the same things that you would in each of them. And having a big ensemble X-Men-like cast in a book is hard to do because you can't just look at a page or look at a screen and see the characters and be able to tell them apart based on what you see, because there's nothing to see. It's a book. It's just very difficult to pay attention to the characters. I forgot Echo existed like 1,000 times. The only ones that I did remember were the ones who have been in all 3 books, and the other ones just should not have been there. And it is also very hard to remember any of the characters in this book because the characters aren't doing anything. Like, they're not important. They don't have any of their own goals or drives or anything that you could tell them apart by. They're just there to help Philip, all of them. And so yeah, they might have a different power and a different name, but other than like, oh, his brother is kind of excited and jittery, and Emmeline's really sweet and kind, and the twins are French, there's really nothing that's given, like no details that are used or come up that can help you tell them apart without just like names and powers and disabilities. Like, that's all that they are. They are their names, they are their powers, and they are their disabilities and nothing else. That is all that they consist of as characters. And so especially trying to do an ensemble cast, that is not a good place to start in any capacity. If he wanted to write a good book, if he wanted to write a good trilogy, I think he really would need to start over and spend a lot more time coming up with his characters and coming up with ways to understand his characters, because his characters are not good, and as a result, everything else that happens is also not good. It's very odd trying to review this book in particular because I had very strong feelings about the first one, and in the second one I saw some improvement, and I could be like, oh, look at that. But this one falls into the same pitfalls as both the second and the first, and while I can see improvement in his ability to tell a story, I can't help but hope he leaves the story behind forever and starts fresh with something else, because it is just not working. However, I still do believe that he has it in him to write a story that's good, maybe even about superheroes, but he needs a fresh start. He needs to focus so much more on coming up with his characters and developing his characters. He also needs to stop worrying so much about being like typical and cliche that he just makes his stories really boring, because I think that's what I've noticed. In his first book, while it's not a good book, I obviously hated it very much. Like I said before, it was at least fun. There were at least things that were going on where I could be like, okay, there's movement, there's excitement, there's something to look at. But in the next 2, it just gets very, very boring, as if it's trying so hard to steer away from cliches that it just avoids doing anything that could be used in a superhero setting to make things more exciting. And with this, my biggest point is like bringing characters back, because a lot of characters die, and they always die in like this kind of bizarre way where it's like, oh, you could bring them back. Like first, Donnie. Like, it would have been so cool if Donnie was brought back in this book, and there was even a place for him. He could have been Adam. Adam could have been him. It would have been so much better than what we got. But instead, I don't think he did that, because I don't think he wants to be a cliche cliche, because he got in trouble for being a cliche in his first book. And so now he's like, oh, no more cliches. And like, there's a difference too between cliches and like tropes of a genre. And so when you're writing in a genre, but you're avoiding all of the steps and things that exist in that genre, like maybe it could be good with like a really experienced, really good author. Maybe that could be good. But especially as like a first project, that's a lot to try and take on. And all that's left is basically nothing. He should have used more cliches. It would have been a lot more fun if he had. If Philip didn't get his butt kicked every single time and lost somebody close to him every single time. That would have been great. If characters came back, if Henry came back in this book, that would have been so cool. If Henry was the villain, oh my gosh, I don't even know how he would do that, but like, that's great. I love that stuff. That's why people love superhero stuff too, is because it's not that serious, it's not that deep, and people can die and come back. That's just how it is. And you could have those shocking reveals, you could have those shocking coming back stories, and it's like, yes, you could have the switches, like, oh, now he's a villain, now he's a good guy. I love that stuff. That's why people love superhero stories. And to read a superhero story where none of that is in it, but we got a lot of therapy sessions, a lot of speeches from speech class, and dream sequences, like that's what we're left with, that's so boring. And it was so boring. If I had to say one thing about this book, I would say it was boring. I read it all the way through, and a week later I had forgotten the entire plot, and so I had to reread it, and then even then I was so scared I was going to forget it again because it was still boring that I had to write every single thing down so I wouldn't forget it. Is this one better than the other two? Is it better written? Yes. Is it more developed? Yes, but I think the only reason why it's more developed is because he has the other two books to lean on for like the characters and stuff, but it is the most boring out of the three to read. After my first time reading it through, all I remembered were they went on dates sometimes, there was a lot of therapy sessions, and Bentley said some techie stuff every now and again. And I was like, that can't be the whole plot of this book. So I had to go try and research it, and then we all know what happened. But reading it through again, like, yeah, no, that really is all the book is. Then there's just a couple fights sprinkled in and a big one at the end, but it is just these kids and these dates and these therapy sessions and dream sequences and a speech class. That is what this book is. Does that sound like a fun, engaging book to read? Much less a superhero book. And the characters that are here, they're just here like they were before. They're completely forgettable, and they're only used when they can help Philip do something. And the fact that all of the characters that were developed are either killed off over the course of these three books or villainified, it just ruins it even more. There's no way, like after I read this book, I was like, will there be another one, or was this the last one? And while I could not find that information, after reading it again, I am completely certain that this is the last book, because first of all, he gave up being a superhero, but also because there's no more characters left to do anything with. There's no more characters left to have a story with. We had the 4 developed original characters, and of them, only Philip is left. Henry is dead, Bentley is evil, and James died off screen somewhere one time. And so now we have him, and then Emmeline, I guess, would be the next developed character, but she sucks too. I don't like her either. She has none of her own struggles or her own things to overcome. She has none of her own goals or desires. She exists only to be the perfect girlfriend for our protagonist. And I do mean it, like, she is perfect. She does everything right. She says everything he needs to hear. She is always there when he needs her. And I don't like it. That's not how people function, and that's not acceptable to have a character be like that. In the last book, the problem was that Henry was like that, and it was problematic because he was the only person of color in the entire series. And especially as a black boy, it was really offensive that our main white protagonist was using him all the time and having him follow him around, and he had to always be there and had to always help him. Like, that was awful to see, and whether it was intentional or not, did not come across well. But then to kill off Henry after they resolve that by having a conversation about it, and then bring Emmeline into the exact same position as like one of the only women in the entire book, again, like, he really needs to spend more time looking into his characters and developing his characters outside of the protagonist, and he needs to stop making it so every single character only exists to make the protagonist more of a hero, more of a person, more of somebody to like, because that's not how people respond in real life, and that's no way to start the building blocks of a story. And within that, Emmeline is a crutch for him, and that's not healthy in any relationship. And that could have been a thing that was explored, that could have been addressed, and how it would have been interesting, this dynamic that they have where he's obviously going through a lot and she's trying to support him, and so he's leaning on her too much, or he's too dependent on her. Like, that could have been explored, but it's not. In fact, it's just treated like that's how it should be. She's just the perfect love interest for our messed up protagonist, and that's just the end of it. While reading this book in particular, I kept expecting things from the other 2 books to come back in. I kept expecting something to tie it all together. I kept expecting something fun to happen, and it just never did, and I'm just disappointed. That's how I would sum up my feelings for this book in particular. Disappointed. It's no secret that I didn't love the other 2 either, and I know I'm not the target demographic anymore, but I still read all of these, and in doing so, I wanted some payoff. But we don't really get any of that. There's really no big event, huge turnaround, emotional confrontation. There's just nothing. And even then, even though I just said I'm not the target demographic, who is the target demographic? Because it seemed like the first one was for the age of the protagonist, which is 12. But then the entire time in that book, like I mentioned in my first video, he's talking down about like 12-year-olds and the stuff they do, which made it weird for it to be for 12-year-olds, but then at the same time, there was like really campy, goofy stuff that would appeal to 12-year-olds, but then at the same time, people were getting violently murdered, and it was like, that's not for 12-year-olds. So it was like this weird thing. And then with the second book, I felt like that one much more fell in line into like a middle grade, older middle grade group. Like not like, I guess young adult, like maybe 14, 15, again, like the age of the characters. But then this one, again, it's like it's trying to be for 19-year-olds, which is just very weird to have like the first book in a trilogy be for 12-year-olds, the second book be for 15-year-olds, and the third book be for 19-year-olds. Because first of all, who's ever going to read them in that order at those exact ages? But then also, like, how come 12-year-olds going to be fun and then 15-year-olds going to be depressed, and then 19-year-olds just need to panic and freak out and pass out all the time and have dream sequences? And like that doesn't appeal to a 19-year-old. I just feel like he thought that would appeal to a 19-year-old. Seeing how these books are all written in this just very like flat, mundane, nothing ever comes back way, it wasn't fun. It wasn't good. I would never recommend the series to anybody. I will say that like mental illness and struggling with PTSD is a huge part of this book, and that in itself is refreshing because again, very few hero stories or even any kind of book where like the protagonists are young and they go through a lot ever have any part of it that deals with this very obvious byproduct of being a hero. But again, I didn't love the way it was handled. It felt very much like an instruction manual that you would read on like WebMD about like what to do if you're depressed or have trauma. If you want to show me like how to handle and deal and cope with this stuff, then show me somebody handling and dealing and coping with this stuff. Don't just show me them sitting in an office with a therapist telling them that. That's awful and not a good story and isn't fun to read in any capacity. And also, the dream sequences need to stop. It's like one of the top rules of writing. Like truly, 12-year-old me reading every article and book I could get my hands on at the time on how to write and how to write well, I knew that this was a bad thing to do. It was one of the first things I learned. I knew this before I even knew how to correctly use a semicolon. The rule is as follows. You know how boring it is when somebody is telling you a dream in real life? Yeah, it's so much worse when you're reading about one in a book, so don't do it. There are exceptions, of course, like if it has something to do with the plot or if there's a message that's being relayed in the dream, like if a character could see to the future in dreams and stuff like that, then yes, of course, write a dream scene. When it's just a normal dream scene where like guy's on boat and he looks up and sees dead friend, like no, don't tell me that. I don't want to know. In this book, the dreams are tried to use to show like his insecurities and fears, but again, like a better writer could just know how to show that in like dialogue and character actions and plot and wouldn't have to rely on cutting away every couple chapters to go into another dream sequence where the character basically announces, I'm sad and insecure. So yeah, I guess I was a little jumbled and all over the place. It's taken me forever to make this video. But yes, I read the last book, so you don't have to. There's everything that's in it. I'm not going to rate it this time because honestly, I don't want to rate these anymore. I don't think that art is subjectively good or bad, but maybe this was subjectively bad. If anything from all of this, I hope that if you're watching this, you can at least learn what not to do when writing a book or story. And again, like the most important thing to ever do when you're writing a book, especially like any kind of like fictional, like fantasies, otherworldly, superhero stuff, is write good characters. And not just the main character. All of the characters need to be good. That's how you write a good story. If you have good characters, it almost doesn't even matter what you do with them. It almost doesn't even matter what the plot is. If you have good characters, your story will be good. So to have 3 whole books where the characters sucked ass the whole time, the books were never going to be good. Alright, I think that's all that I have to say on this matter. So, I'm a nerd, and this is my blurb. Sorry it's been a while. Things have been weird. See you next time. Also, when I got my Audible free subscription, I accidentally let it go too long, so I did end up spending $15 to read this book.